Hi, and a big welcome to intrepid Canadian viewers today too. I feel I've neglected Canada for a while. I have a lot of requests for Canada, so I'm going to do a reading on Canada. Also, of course, for American viewers, some survey somewhere came up with quite a high figure of Americans for the first time who are considering leaving the country. And of course, Canada would be their first port of call. So for some of you, you might be really interested in what's happening in Canada because you never know. You never know. So I'm going to do a Celtic cross to do a more thorough reading on Canada. And Trudeau, of course. Will he get re-elected? So let's have a good look at Canada. You had that awful time with Steve Harper. Everyone has to go through their right-wing turkeys to get to the other side, but hopefully, sometimes when you get a really bad leader, there'll always be those who think strong guys are smart guys, and you're going to have a small percentage who, of course, would have thought he was great. But for most people, I think it didn't work, so let's hope. Don't go down that track again in a hurry, Canada. Okay, so here's a Celtic cross coming up on Canada. All right, with a Celtic cross, because it's quite a big spread, I'll have to move you further away, viewers. I like to get the first four out to get a vibe before I go into more of the nitty-gritty. So, yet again, Canada is at a crossroads. Interesting. So decisions to be made, Canada. When are your elections? I'm not sure what the Canadian electoral cycle is. Now, what else do we know about the Two of Swords? It's also the figure of justice, and justice being blind, doing the right thing and trying to make sure that you make a good choice. See, this figure sitting on a stone throne. It's not all that comfortable, the stone throne. She sits with her back very upright. There's also water behind the figure, meaning intuition comes into play in making this decision. That's hinted at by the moon as well. Right. So all those things are going into the mix about the next big decision Canada has to make. Now, if you look at what's operating at the moment, this Eight of Swords, which is always speed, things happening quickly, and many things happening at the same time, right? So Canada's been under pressure since the arrest of the Chinese, and I think 13 Canadians have been arrested in other places, as a tit for tat for that arrest. I don't understand why Canada did that. I'm sure Trudeau had his reasons, but I'm not sure the reasons were good enough. It was always going to go in this direction. So I'm not sure what the decision-making process was with that. But anyway, lots of pressure. Everywhere's under pressure in terms of how much it can afford, in terms of welfare payments, with personal debt, with national debt. They've had to deal with the renegotiation of NAFTA, to that new acronym that no one can pronounce. Of course, there's a lot going on. But I'm pleased to report, Canada, what is riding over the lot, or the challenge for Canada, is the star, the very lovely star. In other words, the higher good of Canada. And Canada's like New Zealand. It's one of those countries where a lot of the individual Canadian population is capable of thinking of the common good. This is why Scandinavian countries prospered after the Second World War. They looked at the common good, and if you make a better society, everyone benefits. Duh. So I'm really pleased to report that is still alive and well, even if it's been under strain in recent years. So that's a very important and positive card. Underneath the world. So the world is the final card of the major arcana. In other words, it's coming to the end of a huge whole cycle for Canada and having to decide on a new way of reinventing yourself in relation to the world starting now. Okay. Now, if you look closely, those learning tarot, this figure in the Rider-Waite, on the one hand, the female figure seems to be running, meaning forward movement, but her body is also leaning back. There's caution in the forward movement. But it's a very balanced card, something in each hand, all the guardian angels. It's an important card. It's a major arcana. So underpinning this for Canada, there's two major arcana, the world and the star. So that is always a positive sign. Right. Now, the recent history, yes. In the recent history, out in the cold, I would say this is in relation to America, with Blotus running around doing hideous things to sabotage Canadian industries, and he's probably had some success with that. I don't see this as Canada in relation to the rest of the world. I think this is a card of disappointment in relation to seeing yourself as very different from your neighbours, but they're still your neighbours. So this is an all-time low, but it's recent and it's past, in regard to the relationship with the USA. The general sky, King of Cups. Oh, okay. The King of Cups is usually one of the caring kings. If these cards were sinister and heavy and awful, then you have the cruel King of Cups. This is not. You've got the star and the world and making sensible judgments. So this is the benevolent King of Cups, saying to the nation, right, look at the water, the intuitive. This is Canadians' higher self of looking after people. This is the gentle King of Cups. No pushover. Canadians aren't pushovers. But it's important to remember the higher good for the nation as you move forward. And I think this bodes well for that energy coming to fruition in the next little while for Canada. So what does that next little while look like? The Fool card. That's the third major arcana. Okay. Now, I take pains to describe this card when it turns up in personal readings to people, because if it turns up for Trump, it's easy to read at its most base level, which is someone not looking, walking off a cliff, aren't they foolish? But it's also a very altruistic card. It's actually the beginning of the major arcana, and it is also the twin to the world, the beginning and end. It's also someone bravely confident, knowing that the universe will look after you if you take a brave new step. So at its negative and most base, it's not looking, walking off a cliff. At its most exalted, as we say in the tarot, it is a very solid card of trust. The people trusting the government on some level, and the government doing the decent thing for people is the contract. It's the political contract of a nation. And intuitively, I'm feeling it's talking about that contract. So if there are things going wrong in the government in Canada, it needs to be addressed. But the foundation, the source of the Canadian narrative is much more wholesome. Like in Australia, we have our Australian narrative is a bit like the US, that frontier thing. We have the outback thing, Australians are really good, when the shit hits the fan, really solid. We don't have much respect for authority. Australian soldiers during the war were often punished for refusing to salute to officers and things like that. We don't like to kowtow to authority. And so our national narrative tells us we're these renegade sort of people. But in real life, conservative politics, trickle-down economics, people have become more afraid. And it's really sad to see, afraid to stand up to authority because they're afraid they're going to lose their jobs. And it's a very real fear. I'm not dismissing that. I'm saying that's what happens with trickle-down economics. It actually makes workers who have jobs fearful, and it makes people who haven't got jobs settle for crap jobs like 2 hours here and 4 hours there and so forth. It makes for a docile workforce, and that's not good for any country. But I digress. Canada's narrative of being a just, fair country who doesn't back down too, but who cares about people, it's really important to keep the best of the narrative alive. Okay? How does Canada see itself in this time? Yeah, a bit scarred, a bit withdrawn, Canada, a bit more isolated than you have been. And nonetheless, let's look at the Hermit card. Because of having a corrupt real estate mogul jumping on people's heads with NAFTA, it has taken its toll now in Canada, and I think it's going to continue to take a toll. But keep the light shining. So you've had a bit of a hammer in Canada, both through the Harper years, but also with Trump singling out Canada over and over, also dealing with China stuff now. Pulled in a bit, but keep the light shining. Obstacles to that and challenges to that. Okay, group work. Keep the group work happening. This twins with the world card here. So, often this is the card of black money or dark money. So, if you're having problems with businessmen at high level, particularly in government, please deal with it as best you can as a nation. On the positive side of this card, it's looking for quality. This is a couple who's quite well heeled, and they're going to the Master Mason. They want quality. So what does this mean when you're talking about a country? It's admitting, you know what, if you want to keep good universal health care, you have to spend the money, and people understand that, for example, why their taxes are being used. You've got to be very clear and explain to people the basics of the good things they are getting in a country that still provides universal health care. Quality products. Be proud of Canadian products. It's a bit like the Hermit. Buy your own. I think there has been several movements about that around the NAFTA stuff. Buy Canadian. But quality. But also group work. Supporting each other. Investing locally. Canadians investing in Canadians. Okay, the atmosphere. Queen of Cups, how nice. The King and Queen have turned up. Okay. The Lady Di card. It's always been to me quite a sad card, the Queen of Cups. When you read the definitions in books on tarot, it's always lovely emotional things. I've always found it a little bit sad. The lids on the chalice. It's important. It's important. This whole reading, to me, has very clearly been about Canadian values. Don't worry so much about this incident here or that story there. Keep your values and you'll be fine. So you've got the King and the Queen, male and female, the gender stuff going on. Decency is what will pay off. Kindness and compassion are not weaknesses, they are strengths. And that's what the King of Cups and the Queen of Cups are about. And you've got both of them. Compassion is strength. Okay, a bit further out, things aren't moving quickly. You know, the Hanged Man, this is the repercussion of this stupid trade stuff, you know, hanging around. But don't forget, it's another perspective. Having a look. So again, if you band together and support those who have been adversely affected by this stuff, you will benefit. But for now, keep hanging in. Okay, a bit further up, Temperance. Nice. So I'm sure you've got your share of right-wing nutters. I'm saying, you know, not so much close the borders, but, you know, why are we taking immigrants and all of that? Temperance, it's about understanding what immigration is also really about, which is replenishing the working population so people can retire with decent pensions. I don't know why migration flew into my mind when I saw this temperance card, but there's a bit of that. So balance. Canada's famous for not being extreme. Balance. Compassion is your strength. Balance is strength. These are your core strengths. Oh, and as if I haven't said it enough. Oh, balance and pacts and doing the right thing. Right. Strength in unity. You will make pacts with other people in the world. I think the NAFTA thing might have been a bit of a shake-up. Scary as it was, I mean, your instincts, you know, if you're attacked as a country, is to go, it's okay, we can go it alone. But we need pacts in the modern world. Let Trump be the isolationist. He won't be there forever. America will come back. But for Canada, the world, group work, making pacts outside of that dynamic is the future. Oh, Lord. Well, Canadian viewers, please get back to me, and I'll do a dedicated reading sometime because this is long enough. I'll do a dedicated reading on Trudeau soon. But that's it for now. So big love to Canada. Big love. Bye now.